Hi everybody, welcome back. This will be our final video for our unit on naming, formula writing, and balancing equations. And in this video we're going to talk about the 4 different classes of inorganic reactions that you have to know about. Okay? So the first reaction is called synthesis. And synthesis is when 2 elements come together to make a compound. I'm going to give you a chemical example of it in just a minute, but I'd like to give you like an analogy for it first. So I think of synthesis like marriage. So you have 2 separate individuals like you do here. You have Barbie and you have Ken, and they're separate, right? There's Barbie and there's Ken. And if synthesis is like marriage, 2 separate individuals come together to make one. So what ends up happening after the reaction is you have Barbie and Ken that are now one unit and they're married together. Okay, so call them the dolls. So on the left side of the arrow, they're separate and they come together, they get married to make one unit or one compound. Okay, the dolls. An example of that chemically is here, where you have selenium all by itself and oxygen all by itself, and then they combine to make one compound, one product, only one thing to the right of the arrow, selenium oxide. So that's an example of synthesis. Synthesis is when elements combine to make a compound. It's very easy to recognize because there's only one thing to the right of the arrow. The opposite of that we would know as divorce. You start with a married couple, you start with a compound, and what ends up happening is you break that compound apart. So in this case, if we take our compound, we will break it apart into the individuals now that compose it. So this reaction, called decomposition, is the exact opposite of the first reaction we see. We start with a compound and we break that compound apart into 2 separate things. Okay, so that is our decomposition. The third reaction you need to know is called the other woman or the other man. It's called single replacement. So you have an element all by itself and then you have a compound. And what ends up happening Okay, so I'll kind of show you what's happening in the course of this reaction. What ends up happening is this element comes into the picture and kicks Barbie out. Okay, so now Skipper, or whoever that is with Ken, and now Barbie's all by itself, or all by herself. Okay, so you have one element comes and takes the place of another element in a reaction. And you can see in the example that I gave you here, the magnesium is kicking hydrogen out of the compound, and now magnesium's with chlorine and hydrogen's all by itself. That is called single replacement. One element took the place of another. That's it. And now that element's by itself on the right side of the arrow. Okay? Very easy to identify single replacement here because you'll have single elements on both sides of the equation. So it's element plus compound goes to make compound plus element. That's what it looks like. And then finally, our 4th type of reaction is a double replacement reaction, which is a lot like wife swapping, that show Wife Swapping. So what ends up happening here is that the compounds switch partners. Notice there's all compounds in this reaction. So if we think about this, I'm just going to bring this down here so you can see how it happens. If we think about these as being compounds, what ends up happening is that Skipper and Barbie swap partners. So now, after the reaction, you have Skipper with Ken and Barbie with G.I. Joe. Okay, so you made 2 new compounds. in a double replacement or wife swapping reaction. So our arrow would be here, and these would be our products, and these would be our reactants. Notice up here in this reaction, we have the K with the I and the PB with the NO3. Well, what happens is the PB and the K swap partners. Now PB is with the I and K is with the NO3. This is a very easy reaction to recognize because you have only compounds, and that's called double replacement. So just to review, there's 4 different types of reactions. We have synthesis, where elements combine to make a compound. We have decomposition, where a compound breaks down into elements. We have single replacement, element plus compound makes compound plus element. And then we have double replacement, compound, 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 right? You just make new compounds because the things switch partners. That's all for the video tonight. I would like you to finish that balancing equation sheet that we started in class today, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night, everybody. Bye-bye.